Hey everybody, it's Jochen, and I'm back with an update on my Japanese campaign that's going to be starting against Hellsen soon. I've made a lot of progress over the last week or two since I've spoken to you guys. So let me tell you what's done right now. All the army orders for China, all the land unit orders for the home islands, all the air units and initial pilot training in all of this area, Manchuria, China, and the home islands, all of the air orders for all of the island air units out into the Pacific. Uh, Orders for air units in Formosa, and this caused me a lot of problems, uh, which I'll briefly discuss in a little bit. And I've also set up my air units in Southeast Asia. So basically, all the air units are set up. But wait, there's more. I've also set up the air units that are in the Kido Butai, which are over here. The Kido Butai has its orders and has its destination, and the units are set up to do what they're going to do when they get there. But I'm not telling you where that is because that's part of the whole suspense of the first turn. Because this is not a historical first turn, you have no idea where I'm actually going. I could hit Pearl Harbor. I could hit Philippines. I could hit anywhere. I could hit anywhere. The whole map is mine. So you guys won't know where I'm going yet. But let me tell you why I actually lost about a day's worth of setup time. So, I was going through my setup and I was setting up Formosa, and I had said, you know what, I want to really stack this place up with stuff. So I started moving extra bombers in there and all kinds of stuff. And I gave them their orders thinking, everything would be fine. I went on to do Southeast Asia setup. Then I went into the Pacific Islands. And then I started on production stuff. And then my good friend, you guys probably know who he is, Desert Wolf, said, hey, you're testing all this, right? And I was like, yeah, what do you mean, testing? He goes, well, you got to test this stuff. Make sure it's going to do what you want it to do. And I was like, well, what does that mean? He goes, you need to, end the turn, set up like a dummy allied turn, and run it, and make sure everything does what you want it to do. It's like a rehearsal, right? And I was like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. He goes, well, yeah, everybody does that. He said it nicer than that. And we were talking on text, of course. But so I said, okay, well, let me try this out. So I started running some tests, and I realized that my air units on Formosa were not doing what I wanted them to do, like, at all. Like, nothing was flying at all. And I said, hey, man, do you know what I think about that? He goes, turn one for the Japanese is incredibly finicky. It does not behave the same way on turn one that it will on subsequent turns. Maybe it's something deep buried in the code. There's something going on with this first turn execution that things don't do what they will do on any other turn. And apparently, and I did not know this, basically the only stuff that will fly on Formosa on turn one is whatever is indigenously there. Give or take a little bit of variance, okay? For example, all the Nells and the Bettys and the Sallys that are on Formosa, if you move any more into there than what it starts with on turn one at the beginning, A, those units that you move in won't fly, or B, which is my case, they cause other things to not fly, which makes no sense. The stacking levels were low. I ensured that. It just made no sense. But me moving units into Takao, for example, caused the indigenous units that were already there to not fly where I wanted them to fly on turn one. And that was a showstopper for me. Like, I needed those units to fly and do what I needed them to do. And because I had already moved the aircraft into Takao, I couldn't move them back out. That movement was done for the turn. So it basically locked them in there and torpedoed all my setup for Formosa. So everything I did after this was useless. I couldn't use it. So I had to go back and find saved, like, setup turn files that were like days behind where I was actually at. I lost all the air setup on Japan. I lost all the air setup from Formosa all the way to Southeast Asia and all of the Pacific, and I had to start over with that. And the lesson learned. Let me show you what I'm doing now. Do you see all these save files I have now? Look at all these. These are all just set up. So every time I do Every time I do a tiny little change, I make a save. So in case I screw that up, I can go back and fix it. So air setup, research and development, production, all those things you really can't come back from if you make a wrong move, right? If you move a wrong squadron somewhere, they're stuck there unless you go back to a spade before you had moved them. So I lost some time, but I learned a lot. And after the first turn is done, whenever that is, and you guys see what happens, I'll go back and explain in way more detail what exactly it is that I screwed up on Formosa, so you guys don't do that yourself. I don't want to talk about it now because it'll kind of give away what my plans are, and I want you guys to be surprised by what it is I'm doing. And I found similar issues with the air units in Southeast Asia. If you overstack them, or if you put too many in, it screws up to some extent, to a lesser extent, not as critical as Formosa, how many will fly and what they'll do and where they go. Don't ask me why. It's just some ism of the game. Desert Wolf seemed to be aware of it, and he explained it to me, and now I'm a lot more careful. The second time through, anytime I made any kind of change to Formosa, I would save it and test it and make sure it worked. And if that worked, then I'd make another tweak to see if it was better. And I would get to the point where I made so many tweaks to Formosa that the game stopped reacting correctly and things were flying. And then I just retrograded back one turn and said, okay, this is the best I'm going to get. This is the most I'm going to get from this. So I learned a lot about that, and I will share that information with you guys after the first turn is done and you see it in action. I want you guys to know what I know, so when you're doing your Japan setup, you don't make the mistakes that I did that cost me a lot of time. Anyway, so what else have we done? So we have all the air set up. We have all the ships that were in ports, right? They're all set up with orders to start scattering into the winds and doing all that stuff. All the air setup, as I already mentioned. What else have we done? We've done industry setup, and that includes engine production, engine R&D, air production, and research and development. So this video might go a little long, but I want to share this with you guys, and I'll briefly explain what I'm doing and why. I don't want to get into a lot of detail about it. If you want to know more, you should come over to my Discord because we talk about this stuff a lot more in there. Excuse me, I'm drinking a Japanese energy drink called Skull. It's got like this blue eagle on there. It's giving me a hiccup, so I'm sorry. I just need to stay awake. I got to do an all-nighter on this turn set, but I want to get it done soon. Anyway, so let's take a look at engine production real quick. So I've set up both the engine production and the engine research and development. So this is what I've got going on. The Aichi HA-60, which is used on the Judy and maybe a couple other aircraft. I have it set up with two research and development factories that were already pre-made when the game starts, right? So I'm just going to let these... I took one factory down and converted it, and I'm going to use these two to just continue researching this engine to get it a few months early just to do it. And I'll probably let these factories convert into production factories once this is researched, because this engine, you know, that's really the only one I need from there. We've got about 60 engines a month right now coming into the... You know what? Hold on. Let me pause the video. Let me get my records up here so I'm not just talking out of my rear end. Hold on. Okay, magic. I made this little spreadsheet. Now, I'm aware that Cole has a much better one than this that tracks like engine production and airframe production and all that stuff. This is a little bit more simplified for my uses just so I don't lose track of what I'm doing. But let me explain. I can use this document to kind of explain what we're doing. So we're researching and developing the HA-60, and there's only two aircraft or a few aircraft that use that engine, and it's mainly Judy and Judy variants, right? Actually, the D4Y1 does not use the HA-60. It uses something else. We'll get to that. So the initial production plans are we're looking for now this is as of the first couple months of the war. I may bump these up later on as we go. This is our initial targets. 55 engines a month for the HA-31, and of all the aircraft I'll be producing off the bat, the only ones that use that are the Dina 2 and the KI-45 Nick. The A1D versions and the earlier versions of the Nick. Those are what use that engine off the bat. We're going to do 300 engines a month of the HA-32, and quite a few aircraft use those. So, for example, the what do we got down here? The Sally uses the HA-32, and later on, the Francis will use the HA-32. So I'm building a lot of all that stuff. HA-33 engine. This is a very widely used engine. That's going to be used right off the bat by the Val, the Jake, the Mavis, the Betty, and the Tina, which is a transport plane. So we want 300 engines a month because we got a lot of those airframes. And probably the most important engine right off the bat is the HA-35, and we're going for an initial production run of 450 engines a month, and a lot of aircraft use this. Let's take a look at that. The Zero, the Kate, the Oscar, all use that. Eventually, the Tojo, the KI-44 Tojo will use that engine. Now, that's only in Scenario 2. In Scenario 1, it uses a different engine entirely, which adds more complexity to your production line. For Scenario 2, they simplified the production and made it so that the Tojo and the Oscar and the Zero all use the HA-35, so you can just go hog wild on that engine production line, and you don't have to have like an extra engine production line for other stuff. Okay, so let's continue here. I'm going to be researching the HA-43 and the HA-45. So I have 5 factories and 8 research and development factories on these. The HA-45 is a very commonly used engine later in the war. For example, the George, the Francis, the Frank, the Peggy T, and the Grace, among others, use that engine. It's probably the highest need engine into the late war. A lesser needed but still important would be the HA-43. Some aircraft that are going to be using that are going to be the KI-83, the Shinden, the SAM, which is like the successor to the Zero on the Japanese Navy side. And I think that's it for now for what I'm producing. So that's the engine plan. Let's look at the aircraft research and development side. Now, if you really want me to get into the details as to why I'm making these choices, come to Discord and we'll discuss it there. Also, this video will be 10 hours long. But these are the aircraft that we're going to be researching off the bat. And I have notes over here, right? So the Jill, we're going into this, the B6N2, because it does not, so the B6N1 Jill uses a different engine than the it uses a different engine than the N2 model. Okay, we're gonna go for the Grace, the Judy, the Peggy T, which is a Japanese bomber. It's a Japanese Air Force, Army Air Force torpedo bomber, which is gonna give us capability for the Japanese Army bombers to carry torpedoes for anti-shipping later in the war. I'm going into the Oscar and the Tojo line. And now this is very controversial for some people. They don't agree with this. There's one guy on my Discord in particular who's very vocal about how unnecessary this is. I have good advice that this is actually a good combination of aircraft. So both of these are service level 1 Army aircraft, and the bulk of my fighter force is going to probably be Army aircraft, right? So these guys kind of complement themselves well. The Oscar has great range and is good for low altitude cap, right? It's super maneuverable, even more so than a Zero. Okay, the Tojo is a better all-around air superiority fighter. Okay, it's better at PI, it's faster, it's tankier than the Oscar. So if you can work these aircraft together like in a cap zone, you put your Tojo a little higher and the Oscar down low, and if you have P-38s coming in to sweep you, you could drag them down into the range where these aircraft are now way better than the P-38. And the Tojo has a much better climb rate than the P-38. So if you can get it down low, you can start getting an advantage there. I don't claim to be the one that discovered this. I have a top secret planning cell on my Discord for just a few very trusted members, and I'm getting good advice from them on these things. Again, you may disagree. You're welcome to disagree. We'll find out who's right or who's wrong here as this campaign goes on. But for now, I'm going into both of these lines. Okay, the 0 line. This is another potentially controversial move of mine. I'm going to start researching the A6M3 line to take it into the 3A and then to the M5. Now, a lot of people will go A6M2, then they go to the roof, which is the float plane, and then they go straight into the M5. And that particular research line is faster to get to the M5. However, there's something that's missed when you do that, and it's this M3A. And I want to show you something about this M3A. Check this out. I'm gonna fire up the old tracker right here, and we can do a aircraft comparison. Okay, so let me show you what this M3A does. A6M3A, and this is a often forgotten fighter or skipped over, but I think that's a mistake. And again, I don't want to take the credit for discovering this. I was advised and suggested to look into this, and the advice I think was very good. Desert Wolf. Anyway, all right. So let's look at the M3 versus the M2. This is a significant leap of performance, right? The max speed's about the same, but the cruise speed's better. The endurance is more or less the same, but the max range goes up over the M2, right? This is what you start the war with. We get more range, right? You get higher ceiling, better climb rate. Well, more or less the same. Maneuver goes up, not down. So you're getting a fighter that has more performance and more maneuverability than the M2. Way more range. Okay? And it's still service rating 1. So this is a great fighter. This is a great sweeper. It's got the legs to go really far. I mean, if you throw drop tanks on there, you're hitting 15 hexes away. That's almost P38 levels of performance for range, right? Now let's look at the M5. So here's the M5, and you get this 4 months later if you're not researching it right. You get more speed there, a lot less range. See, the range goes down quite a bit. Service ceiling goes up, performance goes up for climb rate, maneuverability drops down substantially, right? From a max of 34 to 29. You still don't get armor, or at least tracker doesn't say you do, for the M5 model. And you're not getting any more firepower. So the M3A, in my opinion, is arguably better than the M5 in some ways, and others it's not. But this is a fighter that's often neglected, and I don't think it should be. So we are going to go down the M3 line and get to this fighter and get stacked up heavy on this, and then we'll continue into the M5, and from there I'll probably go no more than I don't know if I want to go to the how far down the M5 line I want to go. But yeah, that's the plan for that. Again, you may not agree. If you want to have a more lively discussion about that, come over to Discord. Anyway. Okay, I'm going to be... now, this is probably the one I've got the biggest investment into. The KI-84A Frank. This is probably the most important Army fighter you're going to get into the mid to late war here. And with all these research factories, I can probably get this guy down into mid 43. Maybe even a little bit sooner. Let's take a look at the Frank. The Frank is probably the most important fighter that we're going to get, in my opinion. At least for a while. So the KI-84A. We're going to get it sooner with all that research and development investment. Let's compare it to like, I don't know, an F6F5. Oh, dang it. Let's see how it compares it to a Hellcat, right? Because we'll probably see quite a bit of those. Where's it at? KI-84A Frank. How we'll compare that to F6F. If I can find it. sometimes the way Tracker lays out these aircraft, they get kind of hard to find them. F. Why can't I find it? Oh, okay, we're getting closer. F6F3. Okay. Here's our comparison, right? This aircraft is quite a bit faster than the Hellcat. A little bit less max altitude. Much better maneuverability. Durability is about the same. Armor is the same. The only downside to the Frank is the service rating goes up to 3 while the Hellcat remains at 1. But still, this is what's going to replace all of my Tojos and Oscars eventually, or it'll supplement them until it can take over primarily. So I really want the Frank. Okay, Francis is a bomber. The Helen, I have one factor going on there because I want to get it a little bit faster. And once we get to the KI-49-2, we get some armor on our bombers. The SAM. The SAM is your late war Japanese carrier-borne fighter. It normally doesn't come till June 45, but I'm hoping we can get it in late 44. And the reason that we want to stick with this is I still hope to have some semblance of the Kido Butai alive by this time, and this is what's going to replace the Zero and make us competitive with the Allies into 44 and 45. Let's take a look at the A7 M2 briefly and see how that compares to the Hellcat. The SAM. There you go. So again, similar speed to the Frank. Altitude, climb rate's a little bit better. Maneuverability is still better. Durability and armor, again, more or less the same. So this is very similar to the Frank, honestly. But it's a quantum leap from the Zero, right? So let's compare this to Zero just so you can see why I definitely want to try to get this SAM. Here's the A6M5, which is probably as far as I'm going to go down the A6M line. I don't think I want to go to the 8. I just don't think I need that. But you can see the performance is quite a bit better speed-wise. Range is not as great. But there, look at the durability and armor levels, right? I definitely want to get this SAM. Okay, the George for bomber killing. Late war, crazy DO-335 looking aircraft right here, the Shinden. Okay, now this is where things get a little complicated, all right? And I don't know if I still fully understand it, but I've got a significant investment into night fighters here. As you can see, I've got quite a bit of factories and quite a different amount of variance going into night fighters. And the reason being is the Japanese, as the war goes on, get a very strange hodgepodge of fighter squadrons that are night fighter capable. And those have, even with player-defined upgrades on, they have a very narrow path of aircraft that can be used for them. So these are the aircraft that are the best choices for night fighters. And I have it on good advice that I should go this way. Now, a lot of people may not agree with the investment into night fighters that I've got here, but I want to go ahead and make it anyway because I am concerned about the threat of night bombing later in the war. Now, in my case, we have house rules that kind of limit the amount of night bombing that can be done, but I still want to have the capability of having these aircraft around to deal with that threat, whatever it looks like, into 1944, 1945. So these are all the aircraft that are capable of doing night fighting that can be assigned to the squadrons that the Japanese get later in the war. And if you want to know what squadrons they can get, I'll show you right now. Check this out. It's right here. There's now this is scenario 1, but it's not substantially different from scenario 2. This post, which by the way, again, I don't want to take credit for finding this. Desert Wolf shared it with me because I'm not as smart as he is. This kind of shows you what you're gonna get and tells you kind of the aircraft they're capable of having. So there you go. My information is based on this. All right. So we've talked about research and development. Again, I can go into way more detail if you'd like to know, but come to Discord, we'll talk about it there. Finally, the last thing I'll talk about here is aircraft production, and this is my aircraft production plan for the first few months of the war. Okay, it's going to scale up and change as time goes on. But right now I'm looking to produce 60 zeros a month production target. And so the target of aircraft produced per month is here, and in parentheses how many factories I'm going to utilize to do that. These are how many aircraft I have in squadrons, and the plus number is how many are currently in the pool. So I've determined with the amount of zeros we have in the pool that I don't need to go crazy right off the bat with production here. I don't anticipate losing 100 zeros a month for the first few months. That's probably not going to happen. So we'll slowly ramp it up by about 30 a month until we get to about 100, 120, and I'll make the call from there if we need to keep going with that. Kate's B5N2. I'm going right into the N2, not the N1s. So I have 62 in pools right now. I do have quite a few B5N1 squadrons that will need to be converted, so I'm going to go 30 a month on that. Vals, I'm going to do 20 a month. The Jake. So the Jake is kind of important to me. This is a very good air search plane that is shipborne, and I want to have a large production run on these because I intend to replace all the Petes, the Daves, and the Elves that are currently on ships. The Petes, I'm getting rid of them. They're going to the home islands for, I don't know, for training. I don't want them on ships because they don't have a lot of range. The Jake has a ton of range, so I'm going to replace all the Petes with Jakes, at least in the fleet. So I need a big production run to make up the deficit that I'll have for that. The E-14 Glenn. This is exclusively used, or should exclusively be used, on the Japanese seaplane carrying submarines. So it uses an engine type that I don't intend to produce. I start with 122 Amikaze engines, which I don't wish to produce any more of, which I'm not going to, right? So with that, I'm going to do 9 a month until I basically exhaust the supply of engines, and then that's all the Glens we're going to have. Because there's so few Japanese submarines that actually carry seaplanes anyway, I don't need a humongous engine run on that. Hold on, I got to sneeze. Oh, okay. I didn't want to blow up the mic. So we're just going to produce the Glen until we run out of engines, then we shut down this line and there's no more Glens. I don't think we're going to just lose 130 Glens over the course of the war. Okay, Bettys. So with the Betty, I'm going to produce 35 a month, and to take care of, stay ahead of the losses we're going to take. But I'm actually looking to convert over to the G3M3 in mid-1942 when it comes alive. So that's actually a Nell variant, but it's an improved version of the Nell. It has a similar bomb load to the Betty, but even more range than the Betty. So I'm eventually going to phase this out and move into the G3M3 to get the increased range that you get from that. So I don't want a huge pool of Bettys if I'm going to go to this aircraft by mid-42. Mavis, 15 a month to try to just build up a surplus of frames, because with most search planes, you have a high ops loss rating. At least I do. Other people don't. If you look at my loader campaign, I was losing PBY5s like it was going out of style. So I know that. So we're going to eventually scale up to 25, but we're going to start at 15. Sally's, 2A. We're going to do 40 a month because we're going to start phasing out through attrition the KI-21 1C, which is an earlier version of this. And this Sally is going to carry us all the way through until we get the Helen 2. Okay, Oscars. This is probably my most important airframe at the start of the war. I'm going to run 3 factories for a total of 150, 50 each. We don't have hardly any of those right now. And this is the best Oscar we have until mid-1942. And this Oscar is going to be the frontline fighter we've got. Because right now you start out with a lot of Nates, the KI-27 Nate. Let me show you this thing. I'm sure most of you are aware of what this thing is, but it's a hunk of junk. Where's that Nate? This is what we actually start off with a lot of, the KI-27B. And let me compare it to an Oscar 1C so you can see the difference, right? Surprisingly, the speeds are pretty close. But here's the difference: the endurance, the range, the altitude, the maneuver is better, and the armaments. Well, the armament's not a lot better. You have 250 caliber machine guns in this versus two 7.7 millimeter machine guns, which are basically rifle caliber. This is a heavy machine gun. This is a light machine gun. So you get better firepower, better performance. This Nate just does not get it done for you. Okay, so we need to replace all these Nates, which the bulk of our army fighters are actually these at the start, and this is no good. And it uses an engine that I don't intend to produce, the Nakajima Kotobuki. We're not making these engines anymore, so I want to get into this guy right away. So with that, I have a major production run, and we will scale this up as time goes on based on losses and need. The Dina, which is probably going to be my frontline recon plane for a while, I need to increase the production to get rid of these Babs and the Dina 1s. The Topsy, okay, this one's kind of complicated, or maybe it is for me, not for you. The KI-57-1 Topsy is the primary transport plane the Japanese have to start the war on the Army side. But it uses an engine that I don't intend to produce, the HA5. That's a dead-end engine. It's not used on a lot of aircraft that I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ramp up the production to about 14 a month until I burn through this surplus of HA5 engines. Once that's done, the Topsy 2 arrives shortly after, and the Topsy 2 uses a different engine. I believe it's an HA33, 30. It's one of the ones that I'm already producing. So the Topsy 2 will use an engine that I'm already making and will convert to that. But I just want to use enough. I want to build enough of these to exhaust the supply of these engines that you start off with until they're gone. Again, that's a Desert Wolf suggestion. It's a great idea. I would have never figured this out on my own. And the last thing, we're going to initiate L3Y2 Tina production run. So this is to equip the Japanese Navy transport squadron with transports because they start with 25 Tinas with no pool. So we need to build up a pool because we're going to lose these things over time. So that's my production plan. This is my R&D plan. This is my engine production and R&D plan. Scrutinize it all you like. I can send you this file, or you come to my Discord and ask for access to my channel for my campaign, and you can have all this, and you can tell me how dumb this plan is or how great it is. I'd like to hear either one. So with this production too, let's look at the air production. I have a lot of idled factories right now, and why is that? Well, for one, I don't need all these, especially at this phase in the war where we have more or less zero threat to our industry on the mainland or the home islands. I don't need to disperse my production lines right now because there's no threat to them. These factories are more than capable of producing what I need them to produce. The only ones that I'm going to start doubling up on, for example, are going to be like, where are the Oscars, right? I'm going to be producing Oscars at 3 factories. That's because these guys will recover 1 factory per day, right? And it costs 1,000 supply every time these things tick up. If I spread that up, as opposed to waiting for this factory to repair 1 a day, I can have 3 factories repairing 1 a day, which is 3 times faster than if I was waiting for 1 factory to go to 150 on its own. Now, you may be asking me, you may be looking at this and saying, well, this says 24, you said you wanted 50. Well, there's a problem, right? Like at Maebashi, for example. It has no supply right now. Next turn, I've ordered basically 27,000 supply to flow into Maebashi. And then when I have at least 10,000 supply or more, if you may recall from the tutorial I did on Japanese industry, it will start repairing these factories again. But I can't expand them because it costs supply to even expand the slots. It's 100 supply per slot just to make them disabled. So I don't have any supply on this turn right now to expand a lot of these factories. That's why I have that spreadsheet so I don't forget to go back and do this next turn. So much. I've also made some adjustments to the industry, right? Like primarily in heavy industry, right? I've started expanding some places for a total of 160 additional heavy industry production. I spread it out. Oh, excuse me. I spread it out over a bunch of bases in China and Manchuria, which I feel are going to be largely protected from American bombing raids until late into the war. I don't want to lose my heavy industry in the home islands because they'll be subject to B-29 raids, right? But if I have them deep in China and deep into Manchuria, they'll be more protected. So I'm looking to gradually expand industry, heavy industry production, mostly in those areas for now. I also going to be expanding naval shipyards and a little bit of vehicle production, that kind of thing, but not much. Okay, so what's left to do? We need to finish our shipbuilding plan, and if we go back to Tracker, I made a very extensive video on shipbuilding, the shipbuilding planning and all that stuff. Tracker actually has a great tool for doing this, and go back and watch my video in my tutorial section about how to use Tracker to plan your shipbuilding. Basically, you can use this section of it over here to plan it, and after you plan it here and you like what you see, you go into ship availability, which doesn't become available to you until turn 2, and you can start like accelerating or stopping production of basically all the ships that the Japanese are ever going to get, and you use Tracker to do the math to figure out how to do that. Again, watch my video, but I still need to go through and plan my own shipbuilding. It's not crazy. I mean, I'm not gonna get, I already kind of know what I want, what I don't want. For example, what we don't want is a lot of these submarines. Let me show you what those look like. These SS and these SSXs. Where the SSs. Okay. We get a lot of submarines, and a lot of these aren't particularly good. Like these HAs and the rowboats. Let me see if I can find some rowboats in here. You know what? Aren't they under merchant? I think they might be. No, what am I thinking? No. Okay. Let me figure this out. Let's go submarines. Okay. The submarines take an enormous amount of shipbuilding points and heavy industry to build. Right, these rowboats here, right? They're not that great if you look at them. They have an endurance of 3,500, which is very short, very slow speed. They don't carry a lot of torpedoes. They're not very capable. I don't need these. And if I can stop a lot of the production on these rowboats, right? The ones that are like these ones that have 11,000 range, for example, these ones are good. I might keep some of these going. But once we get into like RO100s and further down, they're not that good. These HA subs, they're not very good. And I don't want to produce these just to use them to do some supply runs, right? These I-200s are marginal at best. Do you see what I'm saying? These short-range subs, I don't want them. I could be using these shipbuilding points for better things. Granted, some of these go deep into the 1945 and such, but some of them are a lot earlier, right? Some of these rowboats. I just got to go through and look at it all and figure out what I want to build and what I don't. I definitely want the longest range boats, for example, right? These 21,000s are probably going to be good. I don't know. I got to think about it. And I'll come back to you when I have a better plan, but there's a lot to think about here on the subs, among other ships, and I will use Tracker to help me plan that out. Okay, so after the shipbuilding, or I'm not saying necessarily after or before, just total, one of the last things I need to do, which is probably the most important for my turn setup, is figure out what to do with the special task forces, right? Basically anything that's got an asterisk by it. Those are your special move task forces. Those can go a lot of different places on the map from turn 1. And it gets really complicated when you can use, for example, this task force here, this IGN destroyer, right? You can use this task force to drag a non-special move task force, like Apari Invasion, for example, right? If I wanted to take this guy and drag it to, I don't know, down to Timor and land here in the next turn, I could order the... I'm giving you an example. I'm not saying that's what I'm going to do or that this one is even capable of that range, but I could use this guy and order to go down to Timor, and then I can take the troop transport task force here and have it merge, right? Or meet with this guy here, right? And we can have it merge. I don't think I did the right order. I think it's follow. So I don't know. You can have it merge, okay? And from there, those destroyers that have the asterisk will drag that non-asterisk task force down to wherever it is you want to go. So we can go all over the place with that. But it's really complicated and it needs a ton of testing because it's very finicky. And again, if you don't do it right, you can screw it up. So that's going to probably be the hardest thing I do, is figure out where all my special task forces and not special task forces go on turn 1. So I get the most bang for my buck and we hit him in places he doesn't expect us to. Right? I have an agenda here and I have places I want to go. And if I can speed up this thing and have them go and take bases that I normally wouldn't be able to get to, were it not for these special move task forces, I'm going to do that. But it's complicated. So hopefully after turn 1 goes down well, I can go back and show you guys a little bit more about how to use those special move task forces once I fully understand it and I make it work. That's the key thing here. It's got to work. And yeah, but I have a plan on some places I want to hit that he may not be expecting. So once those things are done, we're ready to go. So I'm going to be pushing really hard over the next few days to try to get all that done so I can get this campaign started. So I do know right now poor Hellsen is sick. I think he's not feeling too well. I think he's been at the doctor. I'm sure he's going to live, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind a few days off himself to just rest and recover. So I have a few more days to get this going, but please trust me, I will get this going soon. I really want to start making videos again. I really want to start playing this game again because this setup has been a real slog and I'm not loving it. And plus I've got real life stuff going on too, so it's really cut into my time for the game. But that's all going to get cleared up and we'll get this campaign going. So I'm sorry this video went so long, but I hope some of the information was useful to you. Again, if you're not on my Discord, you're really missing out on great discussions. Come on over and tell me what you think about what I'm doing. And I will keep working on this, and I'll get this campaign going. And hopefully soon, I'll have a turn 1 to show you. Until then, I'll catch you on the next one.